I remember instead of thinking about my dad who had just died, I was thinking about a boy that I had a crush on in school. And I remember that for a long time I had like guilt over that. Like, why am I thinking about this boy instead of thinking about my dad? And looking back, it was literally the way that I found to escape reality, right? So that's what I found to cope with.
So we got Cheree and
Mayra
today, and Hope to Hustle.
Yes.
Or in English, as we pronounce, Cheree and
Mayra.
Yes, Mayra Dias Gomes.
Yes.
Nice to have you here.
So nice to be here finally.
I think that's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to practice saying it that way. And when I call you, that's how it's going to be.
All right.
In school, me and my best friend, I don't know. I mean, these were the weed smoking days, but we used to be like Thawi and Thewa for Cheree and Sarah. Until this day, it's a thing. It's like, hi Thawi, hi Thewa, you know? I'm like, oh my gosh, we have like kids now, but it's like an inside joke. I'm glad to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here.
How was your travel?
It was good. It was quick. Coming from LA.
Luckily, it's a quick flight.
It's a quick flight.
Yeah. Well, as we learned, it's probably one of those things that we should probably plan in advance because our good friend Brandon is supposed to be here with us today.
He could not make it.
He couldn't make it.
Sadly.
Yeah, because we like to book last minute travel and just get off the plane, run into our meeting or whatever we have going on and back onto the airplane. And sometimes if anything happens with airlines, it's out of our control.
We have busy lives and sometimes it just doesn't work out.
Yep, exactly. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your story. I mean, to me, it's just, you know, a lot that you've gone through, but it's so inspiring. Because I feel, and it's hard. It's one of those things where it's sad that we have to go through such struggles to have such bright light at the end of it too. You know what I mean? And like the struggles almost define us.
Absolutely.
And what I've realized, you know, growing older in age is that everybody has different struggles that hit them at different times of their life. And I feel some of us, you know, who've gone through some stuff younger tend to fall sometimes into addiction, or we just don't know how to cope because we're so young and our minds are still developing, you know?
So and we find different ways of escaping.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We don't know how to deal with it when we're young.
And I wonder too, like if kids are taught how to cope and deal with life stresses at a younger age, would that prevent addiction? You know, them coping, or even if they know, are they still going to go down that path? I mean, did you know anything about drugs or alcohol addiction, any of those things at a young age?
Well, I did, but I was attracted to that kind of stuff. So I did because I found it very glamorous.
Right. Like
I talk about this all the time. I grew up idolizing rock stars and people whose lifestyles were pretty much drugs, sex, rock and roll. And so, yes, I did know about drugs and addiction, but that is what I wanted to be. And I wanted to be different from the other kids in my school who were the opposite of that and who I didn't relate to and who I felt like I didn't belong with. So to me, being a drug addict was what it was to be cool.
And how old were you, would you say, when
I started using drugs? About 14 years old. That's pretty much the age, I think, when I started drinking and tried marijuana for the first time. And then eventually tried all sorts of drugs. I wanted to try every kind of drug. I talk about this all the time also, where I bought a book when I was about 14 years old about drugs. And I started checking out all the drugs that I had done. And I just pretty much wanted to have every possible experience.
No fear in that at all?
No fear at all. Isn't that crazy how our minds are when we're that young? You know, nothing bad's going to happen to me.
Right.
You know, you're invincible.
Yes.
And of course, I was, like you said, dealing with depression and, you know, coping with the death of my father and other issues that I was having as well. A lot of insecurity when I was young. And drugs pretty much gave me confidence and made me feel like I was cool.
If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when your father passed away?
I was 11.
You were 11?
Yeah. I was very young.
Yeah. What happened?
So he passed away in a car accident. But the way that I found out that he had passed away was through an internet article. So I had woken up to go to school that day. I was a really good student at that time. I grew up a very, very good student. I loved reading and writing, and I was really focused in school when my dad was still alive. And my parents had left town to go to a play and a dinner. And I woke up and I was late to go to a math test at school. And my aunt, who lived with me and my younger sister at the time, brought us into the kitchen, and she said she had some bad news that she needed to tell us. And she said our parents had been in a car accident. But she had gotten these instructions from the television network that my dad was a writer for, to break these news slowly. For some reason, they gave her that advice, which was really poor advice, and pretty much changed the course of my entire life, because I pretty much was lied to. And as soon as she said that, I logged into the internet. I mean, we had internet maybe for 2 or 3 years at that point. But I had a computer in my house because my dad was a writer, and I knew how to log into the internet. And so the homepage to the computer was a news page, and it was headline news that my dad had died in a taxi accident. And I read the news and saw photos of the accident. And at that age, it just made me very, very angry.
Right.
It made me very rebellious and very angry. I felt like I had been lied to, and I had been betrayed. And mostly I felt like I was betrayed by God. Brazil is a very Catholic country. So, people are very Catholic in Brazil, and, you're always thinking about God. So I felt if God exists, then why would he do that to me? Why would he take my dad away in this manner? And funny enough, my mom was a Catholic, but my dad was an atheist.
Oh, interesting.
So I was like, no, God doesn't exist, because if he did, he would have never done this.
Right. And you said you have a sister?
Yeah.
How old, is she younger or older?
She's younger than me. She was 3 years younger.
Oh my gosh. And what do you feel the reasoning behind the way that she told you was? Like, what were they trying to
She didn't know better. I don't blame her at all.
I mean, at some point they were going to tell you, or they were just hoping someone else was going.
I am not sure. And nowadays, I think I should have that conversation with her again. And I also think that maybe she didn't want to have the responsibility to break those news.
Right.
My mom was in the hospital in the city that they were in. And I think maybe she was hoping that my mom would be able to tell us. But my mom had also been in the accident. And when she woke up, she didn't know that her husband had died as well. So she woke up saying, like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he?
That's just traumatic for, young children, and for her. Did everything drastically change after that?
Absolutely. So my dad was a very famous writer in Brazil. He pretty much wrote all of the most famous soap operas on television. And he was very, very loved and very respected by the entire country. I mean, he had been writing soap operas for television for many years, and plays and movies as well. He was the first Brazilian writer to be nominated for an Oscar.
Wow.
He was the only one to win the Golden Palm in Cannes. So he was very, very loved and very respected. People loved his work. So this was major news. Right. Everybody was talking about this, and everybody was mourning this very, very deeply. People thought like the quality of television has just completely changed from today on, because my dad was such a great critical social writer. And he knew better than anyone how to portray like the problems of Brazilian people on television through characters. So everybody was mourning this.
Right.
And I remember we couldn't even turn on the television. So I think my mom kind of tried to guard us from everything that was going on. And I remember that initially we went to France for a month just to get away from Brazil and all the news and everything. But my mom was also really young, and she was dealing with her loss as well.
Right.
And I don't think she knew exactly how to go about it either, because she was dealing with her own trauma.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how did you feel when you lose somebody so close to you? I mean, you probably loved him more than anybody, you know, as his daughter. And having so many, like, not being able to turn on the TV and knowing that that's going to be on, like, how did that make you feel as a young kid? Like, did you feel like, wow, he was so loved and everybody's talking about it? Did it make you angry?
It made me really, really angry.
Yeah.
I think the main feeling that I had was anger. But also I remember, for example, the first time that I returned to school and all the kids in my class, they kind of wanted to show solidarity towards me, but they kind of just formed a circle around me and sat around me in silence. And I hated it because I just wanted things to be normal.
Right.
So I hated that people kept coming up to me to talk about it. I hated how people like just wanted to show solidarity nonstop, and life couldn't just go on like it was before. So that was also really, really hard.
Yeah. And I feel like it's hard at that age because, I mean, even now, you know, you see somebody that's lost somebody close to them and you don't know what it is that they need, because a lot of times people do want to just have things go back to normal, and then they mourn in their own time or in the comfort of their own home.
Exactly.
You know, and you go out and it's like, how are you doing? Well, it's like, well, how do you think I'm doing?
It took a while for me to really understand what had happened because I was so young.
Yes.
And I remember like the day that my dad died was actually the day that Backstreet Boys album Millennium came out. And I went to the record store and bought the Backstreet Boys album, and I went home and I was dancing Backstreet Boys choreography. And that's kind of how I was coping with it as a child. Like these were times where I was dancing to Spice Girls and Backstreet Boys, you know, and I wanted things to just be like they were. And then I remember like 1 month later when I was in France, I woke up in the middle of the night and I just started crying hysterically, because suddenly I missed my dad, and 1 month had gone by, and now suddenly I feel it. You know, for that 1 month, I was still trying to really understand what had happened.
Yeah. And that's what's so hard. It's everybody just copes and deals with things differently. You know, I lost my brother a couple years ago, and instantly there, you know, you get shock, you know, and then it's like, for me, I'm such a protector of everyone around me that I love. So I'm like, okay, put my feelings aside and be there for everybody else who's suffering right now, and try to just be there for them, which then I wasn't able to.
I'm really sorry about your brother.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You know, life just sucks sometimes.
You never know. You
don't know. You have to appreciate and love everybody every second of the day. And, you know, it's awful, and it's hard when you don't have those tools at that age, you know. And you telling me at 11 years old to lose, you know, your parent. I mean, I instantly think of my kids, and it's, you know, like this morning I was kind of hard on them. I had a lot going on today, and just everything that could hit the fan and go wrong at once was today. You know, this morning, the second I woke up, and my kids were so excited because they don't have school today and they're on vacation. So last night their little hearts were so excited and so happy, and yay, we don't have school, and they're dancing around. And their first day of vacation, mom's in her office working, dealing with chaos left and right. And instantly when I came here in the studio, I texted my oldest and I said, I love you, and I'm sorry that I was frustrated this morning and I didn't have patience and let him know, because instantly once I walk away from the chaos and I sit down, I'm like, that's not fair to them, you know, and trying to remember.
How old are your kids?
Almost 10, 6, and 4.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they're little, and you know, they're kids. Still. So they're running around and they're playing and they're arguing and they're fighting. And I'm over here trying to deal with work, and
Adult
I'm like,
stuff.
Yes, everybody just shh, quiet, you know? And I'm like, that's not fair to them, and I'm doing my best. And so I just, you know, hearing your story and thinking of my children, it's like I couldn't even imagine. And your mom, how old was she?
She was in her 30s, so she was young. She was my age now.
Right.
Yeah. I can't imagine going through that at the age I'm at right now.
With the 2 young children.
And having 2 children. I have no children.
Right.
I still feel kind of like a teenager sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Do you feel like did she hold it together for you guys, or did she show her emotions to you during her process, or try to hide them?
She did show her emotions, yes. But I also think that she became close to us like a friend because she was young.
Right.
So for me, for example, I loved rock music, like I told you, and I loved going to concerts. So my mom started taking me to concerts. So I was 11, 12 years old going to see like rock bands with my mom. And because my mom was an actress on television, I totally take advantage of that and say, hey mom, can you call this promoter, can you call this venue and say that your daughters want to meet this band and ask if there's something they can do about it. And a lot of times it would work. So my mom would be like backstage with me and The Offspring, for example, you know, and that is kind of how she dealt with it. She tried to be really close to me.
Do you feel like that helped at that time, or do you feel like it kind of caused more harm once
I feel like it helped, but at the same time, maybe, and I hate to say this, it made it harder to see her as an authority figure.
Right.
So she didn't have a lot of authority over me. And I was just very rebellious. I'm like, Mom, you can't tell me what to do.
Right.
I can do whatever I want. You know, so I think that maybe like I lost that sort of like authority figure in my life.
How about for your sister? I mean, how did she cope with everything?
My sister was even younger.
Right. So did you feel you have to be responsible and be there for her during something so hard, or did she not understand?
I don't think that I had that feeling, but one thing that was really great about me and my sister and my mom and my friends, my cousins, the environment that we grew up in, is it was such an artistic environment. We pretty much spent the whole time dancing to choreography, writing plays and acting out plays and filming stuff and editing stuff. Everything was like, it revolved around like creativity and making art. So most of my childhood was spent writing scripts and then performing scripts and filming scripts. So it was me, my sister, my mom, my cousins, my friends from school, and that's what we pretty much did all the time.
Now, being in a household of just your, girls, your mom and your sister, and not having a father figure to grow up with, how did that change for you?
Oh my God, that was terrible. Yeah. Absolutely. Because I immediately started getting really obsessed with boys, which was a really bad idea. But I remember maybe a month after my dad had died, or not even a month, less than a month. I can't remember exactly the time frame, but we were at church, and I remember instead of thinking about my dad who had just died, I was thinking about a boy that I had a crush on in school. And I remember that for a long time, I had like guilt over that. Like, why am I thinking about this boy instead of thinking about my dad? And looking back, it was literally the way that I found to escape reality, right? So that's what I found to cope with the absence of a male figure in my life.
Right.
And so my obsession with boys was very, very extreme. You know, I'd get these like really intense crushes and just be obsessed with a guy. And he would always break my heart, you know, and it would create like a lot of insecurity, and I would always be brokenhearted. There was a lot of like competition between the girls in my school. And I always felt like I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. Like the guy I like never chooses me. And I also like was always very scared of losing a guy that I liked. I had this like extreme fear of loss because I had lost my father in that sudden manner. Like my dad walked out of the door to go to a play and a dinner, and he never walked back home. So I would always think like that I'm going to lose the person that I like. And I feel like that would make me stay in situations that weren't good for me just because I didn't want to lose that person. And so as I grew into a teenager or whatever, like I found myself in several relationships that were very destructive and very bad for me with people that didn't treat me well at all.
And I feel, at that age, already having that issue and then throw substances involved, you know,
Yeah.
I'm sure it made it worse. Did you first experience with drugs with a boyfriend or a guy or friends?
No. So I think that because I was really insecure and I was really shy and I was pretty much like really scared to talk to the boys that I liked, I started looking up to like older kids in my school. I went to an American school, so we had Brazilian students and we also had American students. And the American students were pretty much doing drugs at a really young age. And
Interesting. And that's in Brazil?
That's in Brazil.
Huh.
So like the parents from like different American companies would be sent to Brazil for whatever work, and their kids would go to the American school. That's the school that I went to. So a lot of the American kids were doing drugs at a really young age, and they sort of had like a more rock and roll style or a more like hip hop style. And I identified more with that than Brazilian culture. Like the Brazilian boys, they kind of liked soccer and Brazilian music. And I like the American boys who are like the bad boys, and they liked rock and roll.
Yeah. I wonder why that is. Is it because, like you said, in Brazil, it's very religious, Catholic, and you think because of the
just a different culture.
Right.
But eventually, like, I think at parties, everybody was kind of doing some sort of drug. But the American kids were doing lots of drugs. So they were experimenting with a lot of drugs. And I feel like they were more dealing with like teenage angst, and they liked like the same type of bands that I liked, like Marilyn Manson and Papa Roach, and they were coming from like American rock and roll culture.
Right.
So I looked up to them. And I remember I looked up to this like Brazilian girl who was friends with all of them, and she did drugs with all of them. And I was like, you know, that's what being cool is. Like, I want to start doing drugs as well, you know. And then when I was 14, I started experimenting. And then, you know, that lowered my inhibitions. That got me invited to like the parties that I wanted to go to. Suddenly people thought that I was cool, or the guy that I had a crush on suddenly is talking to me on the bus and saying, hey, you like Marilyn Manson? You know, you want to come to this party or whatever? So yeah, that's how it all started.
Isn't it crazy I mean, we talk about how drugs aren't cool, you know, and like we're trying to teach our youth and let them know like it really is not, because we know that it leads to a bad path. Always. I've yet to see anyone that just
we know the outcome.
Exactly. And nobody wants to take advice from someone who's already lived it, but it doesn't change the fact each generation that till this day drugs is a way to hanging out or being cool for a freshman for the senior. You know what I mean?
And I feel like that's how a lot of kids get into it.
Exactly. And it's like, how do we change that stigma to where, okay, well, how do we make it not cool for the senior to look at the freshman or the sophomore?
Right.
Where if you do this too, then, you know,
you can be a part of our gang,
right,
or whatever.
Exactly. You know, because that's what's scary. And I feel like that definitely is a very valid statement.
Yeah, it's very real.
It is. It's totally real, because what are you going to do? No, I got homework to do. So the crush I have, that's a junior and who already has a car, and I don't have a car yet. I'm going to tell him, no, I can't do that because I have a test tomorrow. Like you're not going to. So you're going to take the risk and the chances of.
There's just so much pressure to fit in and to belong when you're in school.
And even more so now with social media, which is crazy. I mean, imagine.
I can't even imagine.
No.
I can't even imagine.
Social media when we were younger and having, you know.
I didn't even have a phone when I was in school.
Right?
Yeah.
We remember the first, like, the chocolates coming out and the Nokias where you can change the plastic case.
And you'd play the little snake game. And the teachers would take it away.
And to get to the C, it's A, B, C, you know? Yep. I mean, it's like it was so different. And it was so hard back then, even for us, to be able to fit in. And I feel like similar situation, you know, I mean, I have my dad, but I didn't have him growing up. And so it was my mom raising me and my brother at a very young age. She had me at 18 years old, and single mom, and did the best that she could, try to give us the best life that she could. And, you know, till this day, and she's still a close friend of mine, but I respected her as a mother, but I didn't have that father figure. And when I look back on it, I'm like, I didn't have issues with that. Like, I had such a great mom, which I do. But I think I justified that for the absence of having a father, you know, and I can relate to you when you say you'd have relationships that you didn't want to let go of the fear that they're going to abandon you.
And basically. I still struggle with that. That's still a thing for me today.
Right. I mean, I do too.
I have a very, very hard time ending anything.
Right.
Very, very hard time. I never want to let go of people. And so like I torture myself sometimes in situations because I don't want to put a stop to something. I don't want to lose that person. I don't want them to stop contacting me. I don't want to lose their attention, because losing their attention is going to hurt so much more than the way that I hurt now.
It's so true. And I feel like I still have that fear too, you know, and it's like you hold on, and it's almost like the level of questioning when there's nothing really to even question too. I feel like I always struggled with that growing up. And it's funny because Jason and I were just talking about, you know, going to the high school, and you and I are going to go after and, you know, speak to the kids. And
how interesting is that?
Yeah. Right. When we're talking about this, I mean, it's good timing.
We get it.
We totally get it. But it's like, you know, you're beautiful, and we remember being younger, and me and Jason were joking. It's like, oh, we better watch the girlfriends because they're going to be looking at their boyfriend. Like, you better not be looking, you know? And I was like, I would have been
me too.
That girlfriend.
Absolutely.
Like, just instead of paying attention to whatever it is that's going on, I'd be just staring at them like, are you looking?
Yep.
Did you look up and down?
Yep.
Like psychotic kind of, you know? And that was totally who I was. And I look back on it, and those insecurities were because of the fear of having someone,
the fear of loss.
Yes, completely. And that's a hard thing to, I think, honestly overcome. And I don't know if it's to some degree personality, or if it's stemming truly from our childhood trauma. You know what I mean? And it's just trying to recognize that and get past it. And yeah, that's a hard thing to overcome.
But there is also a lot of female competition, and you can't deny that, especially in school, you know? Like, the guy you like might like 5 different girls in your class, and you're struggling because those are your friends, and you want to keep loving your friends, but then also the guy you like also likes your friends. So what do you do?
Right.
How do you feel about it?
Right.
You know?
Well, and I feel like, you know, my advice to, you know, any girls is connection. And I remember being really young, having to tell myself, like, there are so many people in this world, and there's only, you know, God made females and males. So of course there's going to be attractive people on both ends, males and females. And I'd have to remind myself, like, okay, I could say all these guys might be attractive, but do I have connection with them? You know, and that's where we have to be able to understand, like, it's not just about the physical. And that's what's hard as a young kid, especially in high school. They're not looking at chemistry and connection as much as they are as looks. And then you have social media presence, and, you know, have all these filters, which, like you said, you know, we love them, you know,
absolutely.
They're nice. But for these kids, it's like that. They have, especially that age. I mean, you go through an awkward stage where you're not even cute, you know, at 14.
Oh, I felt like I was so ugly.
Me
for
too.
so many years, I think that, like, my most obsessive thought was about how ugly I was.
Totally.
Yeah.
I look back in pictures, I'm like, don't ever show that picture, Mom. Like, that is horrible. It's
and
like
when you look at your pictures, do you still feel the same? Because I'm like, I wasn't that ugly. Like, it wasn't justified to feel the way that I felt. Like, maybe I wasn't hot because I was still developing, you know?
Totally. But you hit a stage of chubby.
Ugly like I thought.
Yeah, maybe not as bad as I don't know. I look back, I'm like, oh, I don't know. That was a cute kid at all. Like, the bangs. Do you remember
your braces?
Those skinny little bangs that you would gel and put your hair in a ponytail? I'm like, Mom, why did you let me walk out of the house like that? You're
more like awkward, I feel
so
like.
awkward.
Yeah.
Just not cute. I mean, I look back, I'm like, styles have changed. But then I have, you know, a daughter now, and she's 4. And it's like, now I see why. I'm like, my mom let me walk out of the house like that because it's not worth an argument. It's like, whatever. Wear and do your hair how you want. And that's how Fiona is. It's like, I want my hair all in one ponytail, and I want one skinny little braid like this. And I'm like, she goes, that's how I want it, Mom. I'm like, okay, you know.
Just let her be.
Yeah, you're going to look back on pictures and be like, why was my hair like that? But No, it's hard because it's like we all go through that awkward phase and you're just starting to get crushes and like, you know, like boys. But I do look back in high schools where it kind of started for me too. It's like ditching class.
Oh, same.
Going with the older boys.
Yep, same.
Trying to get a pass because I'm sick and they have a car, so we leave and now we're smoking weed.
100%.
Coming back to class and now we're cool because everyone else is sober in class and I'm sitting there and I'm high.
Oh my gosh.
Horrible.
Exact same story. Absolutely.
And it's like,
I remember like inventing every excuse in the book to skip class and hang out with the high school boys. Or even just like hanging out at the balcony to stare at a high school boy that I liked because he was on a break at that time when I had class. And this is the only time of the day where I get to see him. And seeing him is going to give me that dopamine that I need to want to come to school today. You know, because school sucks, but he's here, so but at least he makes it better.
Yeah, at least what they should have done is make sure that his break, if they knew that about you, was at the end of the day, so you'd be in school all day focusing to get to the end of the day.
And I remember this one boy that I had the biggest crush on. Like nowadays we're actually friends, so it's really funny. But I was obsessed with him. Like I felt like my entire life revolved around like finding out when he was gonna be downstairs so I could look at him from far away. Like what a stalker, right? So one day I remember he told somebody that I was a stalker.
Oh my gosh.
And it just broke my heart and I was crying and crying about it. And then he told someone else that I was really ugly, so he didn't want to date me. And then because he said that, it started this whole obsession with I'm really ugly. And it came from this guy saying that I was really ugly. And funny enough, like everybody's left high school, we're adults, and like he eventually reconnected with me and he's like, I have no clue why I would ever say something like that. You know, like he was probably having a bad day. He was having problems of his own. He was having like problems at his home. He was dealing with drug addiction and he has no clue why he would call, you know, a younger girl in school ugly and had no idea the effect that had in my life. And he was so sorry that he affected my life so deeply with something that he just said as a stupid young boy.
Right. Well, and at least he had the courage to say sorry too, you know, because I wish we could also tell people in that age, like what they're saying are just words, you know, and that's how hard we take
words
those.
Hurt.
They hurt so bad. And a lot of times people are going to later on regret it. We may not always get that sorry, but we don't know that they're not feeling sympathy or wanting to apologize for the things that they said. You know what I mean?
I had a time when I was going through therapy and I was going through like all these different like events that shaped me. And I kind of went back to all these boys from school and said, hey, this thing happened in 7th grade and you kind of changed the course of my life with this one thing you said. And I went to another boy and said, hey, you said this about me in 8th grade. And all of them were just like really shocked to find out. They had no idea that they had any effect on me.
How old were you when you were able to reconnect and tell them that?
I was in my 20s. I was in therapy.
And your therapist recommended that you...
I think it was my own initiative.
Interesting.
I pretty much found them, everybody in like Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and said, hey, remember me? You know, this and this happened when we were 15 or whatever. And I just kind of wanted to reconnect and tell you how it felt at that time and ask you why you think you did that. And they were all like, I can't believe I did that.
How did that make you feel hearing the apologies? Yeah.
Healed.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that that's a great idea. That's a very courageous thing to do, and a lot of bravery behind that, because that's not an easy thing for anyone to say, hey, this is it. This is how those words made me feel, or what you did really hurt me. That's a really hard thing for people to do. And there could be so much healing around that.
Yeah. So, but I'm only able to do that because that was so long ago, right? Like maybe the things that are happening now in my life that I don't have that bravery to confront, in 20 years, I'll be able to go back and say, hey, 20 years ago, you said this to me.
And it really hurt my feelings.
You know, but right now, I can't do it about the things in the present moment.
Right. Well, and maybe that's something we can try to work on, right? Is that
so hard.
It is. That communication, like this, that hurts my feelings. This hurts me. And I think it's all about how we communicate too, because if we come at somebody calm and saying, you know, give some space between time and then coming to them, a lot of times people would be surprised that you do get that response. And then, you know, if they're not giving a positive response back or an apology for hurting you or anyone, you know, a lot of times that means that there's something they need to be working on. They're going through their own struggles, you know.
Yeah, but I also feel like people don't like being confronted about things when they're still going on. So
yeah, very
a lot of times I have tried that approach when something is happening, you know, currently, and I don't get the response that I want because that person just kind of feels like, hey, why are you coming at me with this? And
right,
you know, I didn't promise you anything, or we're not in a relationship. Why are you, you know, trying to say these things to me?
Do you go through your own therapy and, you know, work through those issues for yourself to be okay if you're not getting that validation or apology?
I'm still in therapy. I love therapy. I've been in therapy my whole life. I never want to not be in therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's important. And people think, oh, therapy, it's because like, you know, you're broken or something's really wrong. And it's like, no, it's taking care of our mental health. Just like going to the gym is taking care of our physical health.
Every month there are things that need to be discussed.
Always.
Processed
and preparation for, you know, the next month to come by things that we've gone through. And
sometimes you need someone from the outside to explain to you what's going on. And then you go, oh my God, I understand. This is why I'm reacting this way.
How often do you participate? Like once a week?
Once a month.
Once a month?
Yeah, nowadays once a month.
Yeah.
Once a month.
Yeah, that's important. I feel like that's definitely important. And how long do you have in recovery now?
I'm going to be in 3 years in recovery on November 28th.
Ooh,
so
around the
coming
corner.
up.
Yes, congratulations.
Thanks.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
But you're a bright light and you're doing so much for so many other people. And I love that you're able to come and share your story and share hope for other people. I mean, everything that you've gone through and that you're opening up about, that even current struggles, like I love that, because I feel like it's important for people to know, like, okay, just because our past, you know, went through struggles, like there's still current struggles.
Yeah.
You know,
there will always be. My struggles aren't necessarily, do I want to have a drink tonight anymore? But there are other struggles, you know, the bottom of what was there that the addiction was covering up, those issues are still real issues.
Yeah.
You know, not all of them are magically solved because I don't drink anymore.
Right.
Like exactly. I have the opportunity to deal with them now and to work at them and to understand them and not make them worse with the alcohol, because the alcohol just potentially makes everything 100 times worse.
Absolutely.
But a lot of things are still there. You know, they're traumas, and traumas I think take a really, really long time to heal. And do they even sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah. And sometimes they don't, but it's just being able to cope and deal with them better than we did before we had the tools to do so. You know, when times get really tough, is there any quote or word that you really hold on to get you through that situation?
When you're going through hell, keep going. Yeah.
I love
You'll
it.
get to the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mayra, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Coming here, such a great conversation.
Yeah, I loved it. It was so much fun.
Thank you. And if people want to follow your journey or reach out to you, how do they find you?
Twitter or Instagram, Mayra Dias Gomes, Mayra Dias Gomes. And you can send me a message or connect with me. I try to answer as many messages as I can.
Thank you.